Hey everybody, welcome to the Power Connection broadcast. My name is Bobby Umar and I'm here with Mike Prosserman. Hello Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Hey Bobby, thanks for having me.
Oh, delighted to have you here. So I've known Mike for a little bit, and today, we do broadcasts every Monday and Wednesday for the Power Connection at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the focus here is around helping people with their professional lives when it comes to, I talk about topics like personal branding, thought leadership, entrepreneurship, public speaking, storytelling, things like that. And then I bring in some guests to add some awesome insights into things that either things I really care about or passionate about, or things I don't know anything about, because either way they add value to my audience. And so that's one of the reasons why I brought Mike on board here to kind of share his thoughts and insights. Now, if you are joining us for the first time, again, use your phones or use your laptop and join the conversation by typing in and commenting with whatever's going on today. So what I'd like to see is people who are joining in, comment below, let us know kind of where you're from. You're coming in from Australia, North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe. Like, let us know where you're coming from. If you like what you're hearing, you can certainly clap and like and heart and light bulb and smiley face. You can also tag people to join us. Say, hey, listen, Billy or Samantha, come join this conversation. Mike's sent some really amazing stuff. And then finally, the most important piece is we want you to engage with questions. If you have questions about the topic today is about, understanding what is your spark and how to take action with resilience. And so, Mike has an incredible story and experience around taking action, building unity, having resilience, particularly in organizational resilience as well. And we want to hear from him and have him share his insights. So if you have questions about anything that he's covered today, put your question below, and Mike is here to answer as anything that he can, and we'd love to kind of hear from you. So let's start off, Mike, by telling us a bit about you and your story, and kind of who you are and how you came to be where you are today, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, and welcome everyone. Nice to sort of meet you through the digital world. It's always fun to sort of connect and connect via the internet. And Bobby, appreciate you having me. So I'll jump right in. I mean, my story really starts as all of ours do at a pretty young age, and I really look back on the things that happened to me in my childhood that had a major impact on who I've become. And I look back to when I was really 5 or 6 years old, and I know that feels like kind of like a long time ago, but the reason I do is because at that age, something sort of transformational happened in my life, and very soon and unexpectedly, sort of the idea around mental health became a really important piece of my journey, and not by choice, but having gone through experiencing a parent who experienced some pretty challenging mental illness as a young child. I realized I didn't even know what the heck was going on, to be honest, and until I was about 10 years old. But I was experiencing all these things, and I very quickly became, again, unconsciously a caregiver for my mom in this situation. And my parents split up, and I was really just sort of living with this stigma around mental health in my life, and not really sure who to talk to about it, and not even being able to process all of those emotions. So it was pretty raw as a young person. I'm not sure if anyone here has family members who have experienced mental illness, but it's a pretty prevalent challenge that we face in society. My mom has struggled for most of her life with schizophrenia, which is a pretty serious mental illness that back then we talked about less.
Right.
And now we talk about more openly, and she's, her and I have many conversations around it, and it really made me the person I am. And I at many times in my life denied that experience and just sort of pushed it to the side. But as I started to open it up and say, this is a reality, this is something that happened to me, I was able to welcome in conversations like this one, but also actions that I could take to address the stigma around mental health in society, in my family, in my friend circle, and just call it out. Sometimes things need to be said out loud and not just sort of assumed, oh, mental health is an important issue. Yeah, but do people really understand the difference between like schizophrenia and depression, for example, and how they're stigmatized in actually quite different ways? Now we're all open to talking about mental health, but we've sort of moved into, there's other dimensions to it, right? Like people aren't as comfortable talking about something like schizophrenia. So I wanted to open more conversations about it, but I also wanted to do something about it. So when I was about 13, 14 years old, I had taken all this stress and anger that I had as a teenager that I hadn't really recognized. And when I found break dancing as, the public general.
You got to explain the lingo, okay? You can't just say breaking. So, break dancing. Okay, good.
So breaking, so b-boying is
b-boying.
Another sort of way that we call ourselves in the culture. And essentially what it is it's a community. I became part of a crew that I'm still part of to this day, who was like a second family to me. And when I was going through all this stuff as a young person, my crew became like a second family and an escape and an outlet for me as a young person. So I kind of sat back and said, well, that's my spark. Like that actually is the thing that happened to me in my life that I can't express in words, that I want to do something about it, but I don't know what to do. So in grade 11 in high school, I just started running these assemblies in our school, and no one was paying attention. They're just like, who the heck is this guy? No one showed up. It was a complete disaster, but I knew the essence of like using hip hop as a tool to engage in conversations around mental health was powerful. I just didn't know what that would look like. So we gathered a group of artists who were part of the hip hop community and were part of my crew and part of other crews. And we just started talking about it. And we met in my basement and took all these ideas and turned them into action. So we started after school programs. We started community-based programs. We just started taking this thing that had happened to us in different ways, in different sort of universes, our different challenges that we were experiencing, and use hip hop as a mechanism to heal and to heal ourselves and our community.
And so, and I think that's really fantastic. And so, from that, what happened after that? I mean, so let's keep the story going. So you started doing all this work and advocacy around mental health and ending stigma and talking about these types of things. So then, where did that kind of lead you in your path?
Yeah. So, and again, I'm not sure if anyone out there had sort of started something or is thinking of starting something, and that's really what I wanted to tap into for today's conversation, is to say, if something is on your mind and it's sort of ruminating inside of you, what is it that you can do about that? And sometimes there's not an obvious action to take, but there's ways to test it. So to your question, we just went out there and started doing stuff. And, we went into schools and started building these programs. And then all of a sudden we looked back and we had built an organization. And I never wanted to be a boss or, have a hierarchy or any of these things. And we really rejected a lot of these concepts when we built this organization. But over about 15 years, we, one action at a time, built an organization called Unity Charity that now it's 17 years later, I actually decided to leave 2 years ago because I was just feeling kind of stale and irrelevant at that point, which is a whole other conversation around, when do we need to take a step back so other people can step forward,
right.
Especially relevant with things going on in the world around creating space for other voices, specifically Black voices and, the issues around anti-Black racism. So I said a lot there, but I do think we need to reflect on, both the building process, but also the, how do we leave on a high note and decide to move on and create space for other voices. So that was a lot of a big part of my narrative and my experience is just sort of feeling like, okay, nothing lasts forever. We all have a clock. We all eventually, have to move on. So why not, sort of plan that in every step of what we do and bake that into our succession plan from the beginning. So as you can see, this thing sort of took a life of its own. And in between, we built a team culture like no other place. Sometimes I think that the people at Unity would would struggle to get a job otherwise because we made this impossible culture,
Right,
this
right.
unreal fairy tale culture. But actually, a lot of them did go on to get better jobs, down the road. So I think it's about, for me, building something and taking a spark or something that maybe you have experienced and turning it into something, and going a step further and making that action that you take one that treats people well, one that cares for the people, that not only that your customers or your clients or those who you're serving, but your team every single day.
So let's talk about that spark a little bit more, because I think that's a really good segue into something I want to get into. I want to dive into spark. And before we do that, I'll share a bit of a story. Now, if you're just joining us, I'm talking to Mike Prosserman. He's written a book. What is the book called? It's called Unity, or what's it called again?
Building Unity.
Building Unity, excellent. Building Unity, and we're talking about resilience. We're talking about taking a spark into action. I'll share a story of a spark, which was back in the day when I was working my first job after I graduated. I was working as an engineer, design engineer for Bombardier, and I was doing musical theater productions. And I did a couple of shows with three different theater companies. And by the time I got to the third one, I was like, man, like these theater companies are terrible. Like they're really disorganized. They don't listen to people's suggestions about improving things. And I was like, this is really bad. And so I started talking to people about why don't we do something on our own. And it sparked the inefficiencies and the disconnection that I was feeling compared to my previous experiences of musical theater productions in my university days. Sparked me like, let's do something. So I started talking to people, and then within about 2 months, we launched our own theater company, and we started producing and directing our musicals and shows. And we wanted to make it more community based, and it sparked that, and I loved it, and I did it for 4 years. And then it also sparked the idea, well, maybe I should do engineering, because I was an engineer, and I was bored of my job, and I was working the same amount of hours in the theater company as was. And so then I decided eventually to leave and do an MBA in marketing and try to switch into entertainment. That was my initial goal at the time. So that spark was interesting, but let's talk about the spark. Like, can you explain more about this spark and what exactly is it, and how do we feel it? How do we know it's there?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think it's something that I'll just use my own example. Like, I spoke to that earlier time where I was literally just a kid, and like I didn't know what was happening to me. It was just happening to me, and I don't know the impact that had on my life. It turned me into the person that I became when I was a teenager, before I started doing something about it. And what I realized was, we were kids doing this. We didn't know what the heck we were doing. We just took that feeling, whatever it was, and we couldn't even describe it. We haven't even fully made sense of it, and put it into the smallest action. So the first action for us was, let's put on a performance for our high school, right. And we just did it. So to me, it's really about sometimes taking that feeling. Maybe it's the news and things that you're hearing right now. Maybe it's something you experienced when you were in the workplace, like you said, and something was missing that you thought needed to be there. And you just have always thought in the back of your mind, like, maybe I should do that thing. Maybe I should do that thing. Maybe I should do that thing. And it just kind of repeats. And what I encourage folks to do is to just try a small, safe version of the thing without having to quit your jobs or,
right.
Put off your whole life. Is just try a thing, like go deliver groceries to, your elderly neighbor. Go, promote something on your social media or on your business website that has to do with something that you truly believe in. Like, I feel like I use the analogy of like building the plane while flying it. Like, just throw yourself off the figurative edge and figure out the details as you are sort of falling towards the ground. So to me, that feeling, like what it is actually the feeling that hasn't fully been articulated. And I think there's a lot of fear that I experience around those ideas, because I'm like, I don't know if I should like do that, because, maybe this person will think this way about me, or, maybe my wife will kick my butt because, we have to keep our
It's a lot
job.
of it's a lot of work, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's a
Yeah.
lot of work. Maybe it's
Yeah.
scary, like there's so many excuses that we can create along the way. But like you just took that idea and you did it and you put it out there. And 4 years later, something that didn't exist in the world now exists.
Well, I mean, but when you look at the spark, though, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that have that spark or have something in their head and they have it for years. There are people who have these ideas of things they want to do, and they actually stay at their station or their lot in life or their desk, whatever it is, for 10 years. So, what is it that is stopping them from moving forward on that spark?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to be honest, if you notice, I'm speaking mostly and only from my own experiences because everyone's
Of course.
experience is different. Like I'm not anyone to say how people are experiencing that feeling. What I can say is the action of just moving and doing the smallest version of any version of that thing is the only way to activate and bring it to life. Like it could literally be just talking about it with your best friend.
Mm.
That could be the first step in taking that thing that's been in your head for 10 years and bringing it front of mind. Because then all of a sudden, once you start talking about it, then, oh, you're getting some affirmation, you're getting challenged that that's not a good idea, and you're learning something. Like, so for me, I feel like just speaking about it sometimes
Yeah.
is a great first step because, especially with a friend that will like not just sort of blow smoke at you and tell you you're doing great stuff. Like someone would actually challenge you and say like, I actually think that's not good, and here's why. And then that actually what sort of gets it closer to, yeah, I actually want to do this, or no, maybe that wasn't a good idea, and now I can sort of park that and bring forward other experiences and other sparks.
I think
Um,
that I think you bring that's a great point. I mean, the more you talk about it, the more likely you're going to start manifesting it and planning for it, and someone you might spark someone else to actually join you on that. So I think you're right. Talking about it, and this relates a lot to what I talk about when it comes to personal branding and career transition. Like you're 80% of people are unhappy or dispassionate with their jobs. Okay, well talk about it and think about what else you want to do, and pretty soon you might be able to move on something or act on it. So I think that talking piece is actually a really powerful thing. Now we're talking with Mike Prosserman about resilience and taking action, even in times of uncertainty. Nowadays, we're dealing with a really challenging time. We're working from home and things like that. I think it's challenging for a lot of people. You're also a mental health advocate, which I also appreciate. What are your thoughts on how things are going? How are things going for you during this COVID time and work from home? And then maybe we can talk a bit more about the learnings from that. How are you coping?
yeah, it's interesting because I'm thankful to be safe and thankful to be healthy, and I start with that, and at the same time, on a mental health level, I experience personally quite a lot of anxiety, and not just sort of fear of something happening, but I actually it sort of takes over my body as well. And
Wow.
for those who experience anxiety, it's not an easy thing to have in your life. It's not always a good friend, but it's someone that I've learned to sort of welcome into the house. So it's been a tough time. My wife is a frontline worker. She is a doctor. So I'm focused on taking care of her, and I'm supporting a lot of nonprofit leaders. We do peer circles where we just share
Yeah.
our biggest challenges. And it's hard to wake up, honestly. Like some days are really, really tough for me. And I don't look at myself as an expert in anything. I just try to wake up and take on the day every day that I'm alive. So it's a tough time, and I care deeply about my friends right now, and my
Mm.
colleagues who are also struggling, and I just sort of say I'm here, like, and sometimes right now in an authentic way, just connecting with people one on one. Sometimes even not by video, but like by phone, or
Sure. Mix it
you
up.
know, mix it up, change it
Yeah.
up, because I get a little bit zoomed out or whatever
Yeah.
videoed out we call it. But for me, it's really how do I create connection, in a time where, we're actually living in isolation, and that's exacerbated by everything that we see around us. So I really do want to create positive moments for connection with human beings. And I know that sounds like super obvious, but it's actually really hard to do right now.
It is. Yeah, no, I see that. I mean, one way it's nice because we're getting more intimacy with some of our video. Like here we are in a video, and behind me, like we're in my son's room because I've been relegated from the dining room where my kids are to do my live stream, right? And so it's an intimate view into my home, and and I was going to show this thing on the camera. I'll show it now, but it's pretty funny, which is there's Darth Vader. Do you see him? Darth Vader. There he is. So my son is a Darth Vader. He's a Darth Vader, and he's wearing a T-shirt. I just think it's really funny, but I didn't put it in, but I was going to. But it's just funny because we're all here sharing our lives and what we're going through. So it's kind of funny to kind of watch how it's going. So I think that it's a good time for some sort of connections. I think that's really good. And again, I think a lot of what you talk about is really important. And I think people do see you as an expert. I know you said you're not, but you are. I mean, you have a book and you have experience, you have insights. And as someone who's a proponent of thought leadership, personal branding, every single person I talk to has insights, has experience, and has a brand that people can resonate with. And so my job is to help them share their message with the world. So one of the reasons why I brought you here is because I want you to share that message. For those who are again just joining us again, we're talking about resilience and taking that spark and turning to action. Let's now talk a bit more about resilience. Okay, so COVID is a perfect example where we need to be more resilient. So maybe can you talk a bit more deeply about what resilience is like? I mean, a bit about what it takes what are some of the challenges around resilience, and then how can we cope with and create more resilience in our lives?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, and no, thanks for the idea around expertise, and really that's the whole. No, yeah. But it's true. Like that's my self-doubt talking, right? And
no, totally.
And that's your jam, and I appreciate you calling me out on it.
I have self-doubt too. Like my self-doubt is, I put out these live streams. I still never know whether they're impactful or helpful. But sometimes someone will put a question or they'll do a heart, and I'm like, oh, okay, what's working. But the self-doubt is always there, right? And even for me, like everyone has it, so I totally get it.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate that call out. It's important, and I think it's important for everyone watching. Like you said, everyone has value. Everyone has something to offer, and I really do believe that. And when you give people that power, it unlocks unbelievable things when they see it in themselves. In terms of resilience, I mean, that's the perfect segue to your question, which is, just finding those things that get you up in the morning, because with many more things that will not get us up in the morning and reasons why not, I've spent a lot of time on a few things that do get me up. One of them being my dog, one of them being just like random things. Like I wanted to learn to make coffee better. Like I made the worst coffee forever. And it sounds ridiculous, but I've watched probably 4 hours of YouTube videos on how to make good coffee. Okay. And I make coffee for my wife before she goes to work. So it became this like funny thing where like on the surface level, it sounds ridiculous, like making coffee, that's silly. But actually it became something I began learning about. And then it became something that I'm like, oh, if I like time it in the right way and measure this and do that, then all of a sudden, it tastes better. And funny enough, when I brewed the perfect coffee, my wife was like, it actually tasted better before. But I'm like, whatever, like it's funny. I learned a whole other thing. But I guess like for me, it's finding the smallest thing that I can get motivated about. And for me, I noticed like really truly like connection, like these peer groups that I run for nonprofit executive directors, like when we hang out and we share what's going on in our lives, I feel like joy. I feel real joy because we're there for each other. And when I'm watching Netflix, I feel like something's being drained from me. So like again, it's one of those weird things where I can't describe it in words. And so much of our lives we spend trying to describe things in words and articulate things, in the verbal or written sense. But I actually believe strongly in when I feel something, how do I listen to that feeling? And I'm feeling, and I'm sure we're all feeling lots of
A
different
whole wealth of emotions. Yes.
every day. It's a roller coaster. So how do I listen to that? How do I listen to
Yeah.
what I'm feeling right now and ask myself, what do I really need right now? Like it's like a thirst,
Mhm.
like what do I need right now, and how do I bring that to my life in the situation that I'm in? Because it can get super overwhelming in the isolation, especially if you're experiencing mental health challenges, especially if you're experiencing or living with some of the systemic racism that's happening in the world and have been for your whole life. Like amplify that with COVID, and it's a scary world to be in. So I've been listening and truly taking that extra like that
Right.
extra breath,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
saying, what do I need right now? Because I want to be around in 20 years to be talking about this stuff, and I really do lean on my friends, and ask for help when I need it. Honestly, it's not easy.
One of the things you said that really struck me was the focus on some of the small things that get you through to be more resilient. Because I think a lot of people think of resilience in terms of, well, you know what, it's gonna help me get that new job or deal with all this craziness that's happening, and and fight the big battle, and ultimately, we get overwhelmed, and we do nothing. But if you actually focus on one or two small things, so like what's a small thing I can do to uh, I mean, the other big elephant in the room is dealing with the systemic racism and the racial injustices we're seeing, and it's overwhelming. It's a lot there. What can I do to even just start like a small spark, right? And so the first thing I would say is listen, book a call with someone that you think would be someone good to talk to. Find a one video or one resource to do it, but like don't overwhelm yourself. Like I need to completely change my life and spend 10 hours on this thing, because yeah, you're not gonna do that. It's gonna be harder to do that. So even for me, like I get overwhelmed honestly by the dishes. The dishes overwhelm me. Like how can I expect to even be handling everything when I'm dealing with the dishes? And so it's like maybe just a couple of bowls, put it on the rack, and that's something good, right? And so I think it's the same thing. So it's important to know that. Now, we're talking to Mike about resilience and find that spark. And people are sharing some great comments. Olga saying, "Good to see you get through this." Greetings from Ghana from Michael. Good afternoon from Simeon. Elizabeth actually has a question. So, for you, does physical exercise help?
I mean, again, I go back to everyone experiences their experiences differently. So for me, I'll just share a story. 2 weeks I've gone by where I usually dance, like I'm a b-boy,
Right.
as we
Right.
call ourselves, a break dancer to the
I
general
believe it. I believe the correct term is b-boy. In case you didn't know, just saying.
Thanks, Bobby. So I'm a b-boy, and holding down the b-boy stance, and I've been dancing my whole life. And the last 2 weeks, as I'm telling you, oh, think about what you need, like I haven't danced at all,
Oh.
and it I've noticed I've been becoming more grumpy, more, you know, whatever, just not like my full energy. To be honest, it's one of those things I can't describe in words. I often refer to that because it's, everyone feels things, and sometimes we try to articulate it too much. But when I danced like yesterday, I just felt better. And I know this is a tough thing because everyone's spaces are quite different. and that's the reality of like living in a condo or living in a, a 1 bedroom apartment versus, actually having the space to do this. So what I, encourage is just move, any type of movement that you can get right now. Like Bobby's doing his little, is that Backstreet Boys or?
No, it's terrible. It's terrible.
That's great. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Move. It sounds silly, but like
Yeah, yeah.
you just moved your neck, but like you moved, like you might not have moved that muscle in like a month.
Right.
This is how people hurt themselves because, especially at a computer all day, you're like this, and all of a sudden you do that, and you're like, like, get moving, move
Yeah,
your
no,
body. It's powerful, and we're so like sort of body sensitive that we don't actually move our bodies. We're, the image of it all, like whatever it is for you, whether it's 10 push-ups, 2 push-ups, or a couple jumping jacks, like movement is a really powerful thing,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that is really good. Now, I want to, and again, if you're on this broadcast again, ask questions of Mike. He's got some great insights. Tell us a bit about your book and why you wrote it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because it was originally like a journal for me. I was just, every time something unbelievable happened to us as we were building Unity, the organization that we started almost 15 years ago, every time we something ridiculous happened to us and we learned something, I just wrote it down, and I wrote it down, and I wrote it down, and then I looked back about 2 years ago after I had left Unity, and I realized, looking at these journals and some of these reflections, that people learn through stories, and I learn through other people's experiences, through mentors that I have. I'm constantly tapping them on the shoulder, not to tell me what to do, but to share a story. And that's really all this is. It's a collection of stories that, after I've sort of shared some of those stories with individuals, they've said, you should tie these all together in a way that makes sense for the nonprofit sector, for the business sector. And that's exactly what I did. I took all the stories and I wrapped them into this sort of 6-step model, which it starts with Spark, which is what we've been talking about today. Then it goes into build, like how do you build the plane while flying the plane?
Right.
And then how do you build teams? Then how do you fundraise and scale your operation? And then how do you leave at the right time? Like kick your own butt out of your company so someone else doesn't have to do it. And then the last chapter is Respark, like what's the next thing? So it's almost like a continuous cycle of like, similar to you, you did the musical theater thing, and then you've moved on to the next piece, right? The next chapter for you. So I wanted to share that process with folks. So this comes out in September. It's not actually officially out yet, but I'd love to share it with anyone if you want to have a conversation about it. I don't want this to live on people's bookshelves. I want this to, become a talking piece, which is why, I'm so thankful to be able to, just hang with you today and get you dancing like the Backstreet Boys and whatever it takes, like I appreciate this a lot, man.
Well, and you brought up a bunch of stuff that I now want to ask questions about. Like, how do you the one where you said, how do you build while still flying? So like, that's something I'm curious about. That was the second phase, right? The how do you have the spark, you start building. So now how do you build it and grow it while you're still flying? So explain that a bit more.
Yeah, it goes back to a little bit what we spoke about earlier around sort of taking that spark and turning it into something, and just taking risks that are not too risky, like just trying something. And what we did was we'd have an idea. We'd usually come up with it in my basement. We'd invite like 30 artists to the basement, and we would all just say, what can we do using hip hop to build community, to improve youth mental health? And we would just talk for hours. And we would generally walk away from those meetings once a month, and anyone was welcome to come, but people specifically from the hip hop community were invited to attend. And we would just take an idea and go try it. And we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't have a website. We didn't have, some business card or fancy, package at that point. We just did it, know. And the beauty of that is it's building the plane while flying it. It's like, we've experienced this thing that we know has power, and we've seen the power of it in our own lives and the impact of it in our own lives. What are ways that this could be? Is this applicable for other people? Or, might this be a useful tool for someone else? And the only way you'll ever answer that question is by trying it in the smallest way. So I'll give you an example. So I'm not just speaking in like figurative terms. We at one point had like many leadership, many programs going on in multiple schools, and we said there's some like sort of standout leaders in some of these schools who are also b-boys and b-girls, breakdancers,
Right.
and we said, what would happen if we got them all together, like all these sort of leaders who are sort of running these after-school programs in their own high schools. Like we just felt like bringing them together, something positive might happen, and we had no idea what that positive thing that would happen would be. And we got them together, and for 2 hours we spoke about, again, what could we do together with this group? Is it useful to bring this group together? How are you using hip hop to sort of share your story in your community, or make an impact in your community? And by the end of it, we decided to meet every week. And then every week we would make small steps, and eventually they started teaching a class. They got funding from Toronto Public Health to run a series of workshops around breakdancing in connection to anti-smoking. And these were teenagers, keep in mind. And they kept building and building and building. And they traveled all over the world. They applied for funding to go to the Yukon, and they went out to the Yukon to a conference there. And all we did was gather. So I do believe, we spoke about this earlier, about the power of just taking an idea and turning it into a conversation as a first step. And we all we did was gathered. And that conversation turned into years and years and years of programming that, many of these young people are no longer young. Like I met them when they were 15. Now they're probably 26, 25, it's over a decade later. And they're still in touch, they're still finding ways to make impacts in the world in their own way. And, it was just a beautiful thing to see that impact over the years, and the way that these young people have taken the responsibility of contributing to society,
Right.
and done it in their own ways, and in their own hands. So I do believe, and that was just one program out of like 6 or 7 different programs we ran, but we just took an idea, gather the leaders of each school to hang out and talk to each other. And that turned into years and years of program and impact. So
Now, I have another question for you, which is around culture. You talk about culture. So, how do you create a better culture when it comes to when we're building? I'll give you an example. Like I actually have something I'm struggling with within my own team, which is there are people on my team who are very engaged and responsive to messages, particularly on our Slack channel, and there's others who are not. And so I'm trying to figure out how to, and so I try to be the example by whenever people Slack message me for a question, I respond right away, to show that I'm responsive and I'm engaged and I'm accessible. But how do I create culture change when so many people don't do that? And I'd love to get I'm giving you a very specific example, but yeah, I'd love to kind of understand how to best deal with that.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy to share an actual, a real example of a similar challenge, if it's cool, like, to share. It's a little bit different, but it's similar. We were trying to get everyone on Google Calendar at Unity back in the day, and it was just like, it was like a nightmare. It's just like, I use this calendar and I use that calendar.
Right.
Sync the damn calendar. So we all know there's a meeting on this day at this time. That's the only point of moving to Google Calendar. I understand you like to write yours and you like to post on, Outlook, and you do a different thing. So eventually what I realized, because we had individual meetings with each person, and we asked them, like, how do you want to be communicated to? And what we learned was everyone actually really had a different style of communication, not just on like I like this, but like, some people actually had, trouble with reading all this stuff, or get overwhelmed by technology and all this stuff. So we learned that some people wanted to be texted and some people wanted to be phone called. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's a lot of work, like, am I willing to do that? But what I realized was the little effort it took to do those things and communicate a little bit differently with each person in the way that sort of they needed to communicate and be heard. Transformational like change. Like people just said, oh, cool. Like you actually heard me. And then all of a sudden people started jumping onto the Google Calendar. So I'm like, wait a second. I was texting you and I was, calling you. And then, my goal was the Google Calendar. And then just by sort of listening to your needs and responding to them and respecting them, you've now jumped onto the platform that I suggested. Like what happened there? Like I thought we were
exactly
differently to all of you. And I think it was just this fundamental, simple thing of we're just saying like, how do you want to be communicated to? Like, and when I asked that question, it gave them the agency to say, I actually hate this thing, Google Calendar thing, but you know what, for you, Mike, I'll use it because I reckon, or for not even for me, for the team, because we realize I can't be communicating with everyone separately in a different way. But just having the conversation around it got 90% of people on it. There were still those two people who, they never did, but then they would miss meetings and we would say, they would see it was out there. But I think right now, especially more than ever before, it's because everyone really does have different needs right now. Working from home, whether it's kids, whether it be, schedules that are now new, like partner schedules, et cetera, and space, is just getting a real honest, like, what's the best way to communicate with you right now? And some people might say like, not after this time or not before this time. And like, it's like, okay, maybe I'll draft the email and push send, at 9 or whatever.
Right.
So it's hard to listen to people because if you have a team of more than 10, taking all these different sort of requests can be challenging. But I think in a world where there are no boundaries and there's less boundaries than ever before around communication with COVID, I think we have to sort of get attuned to sort of what people's boundaries are and maybe even help them set some of those boundaries and say, look, you need to stop communicating with me after this time, and I'm going to stop communicating with you after this time. I'll give you a real example. I used to send emails at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., weekends, holidays, Easter, Christmas. I was the worst. And then we sort of just made a pact and said like, no communication unless it's between 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And it was like one of the hardest things for me to do. But as soon as I started doing it, like everybody just felt like they could trust me and like that I wasn't just gonna just throw, like, I guess what it really showed is that I cared about them. Mm-hmm. I valued their well-being and talking about a mental health advocate, as I sort of called myself, like, how am I going to consider myself someone who cares about mental health when I'm not respecting the work-life boundaries of my team? So I'm not sure how I got onto that rant because that's not really what your original question was, but
that's okay. But I appreciate the story and the perspective of that, and I think that just me booking calls with people to understand what their preferences are will probably serve me very well in terms of dealing with the culture change in the organization I'm trying to do. So I appreciate that. Where can and I want to make sure Elizabeth says quite involving and challenging. Wow, yeah, no, I agree. We're kind of getting to the end of our time, so I kind of want to understand how can people get in touch with you and ask you further questions. Like if you're on this replay, you can also ask questions and tag Mike and myself to answer questions. But how can people reach out to you, Mike?
Yeah, people are welcome to reach out. I don't know if I can type it in the chat box, but if anyone's interested,
you can.
Yeah, the message your team one here.
If you go to the actual broadcast, you can actually type in the actual broadcast and it'll show up.
Okay.
We'll do that later, not right now.
We'll do it later, yeah. For now, if you want to get in touch, you can email me at info@piecez.ca. You can also, if you want to grab a copy of the book, check it out, buildingunitybook.com. I would love to share it with you. I am obviously selling it, but I would give it away for free if you're struggling right now and just want a copy. Like, I don't care. Like, my goal is to get this into your hands, and
Right.
it's really to start conversations. Like, I really, it's hard to explain when you've put 17 years of your life into like one thing.
Sure.
And I think it's overwhelming to, it's just overwhelming to describe that sort of feeling. And I would love to share that with other people. So I do have a digital copy. If people wanted one, just hit me up, info@pieces.ca. I'd be happy to send it, because I really do want to bring it to life, especially right now, because it's all about building resilience. And in a time where, for lack of a better word, resilience is hard to find some days for me, and
Right.
it might be for you as well. I would love to have that conversation. So please reach out. Let's chat.
I appreciate that. And before I let you go, the last question is really, and actually, before I ask the last question, let me just remind viewers that we are on Mondays and Wednesdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just an announcement that I'm thinking about changing the time again. I know people get upset because they keep changing the time. First, it was like 9:30, then 8:30, now 1:30, and then it was lunchtime. Part of it changes because of my children's schedule. And that's the reason why it's shifting. So I'm finding out that during lunchtime, they need me and they have questions. And so now, like, I'm going to come out and I'll have like a dozen questions. Daddy, you missed this, you missed this. And so I may have to switch again. So I keep having to switch the time. But what will happen in a couple of weeks, the kids' homeschooling will change, and then I will be able to shift this. So it's going to shift the time. But for now, it's Monday, Wednesday, 1:30 p.m. I have other interviews set up too, so please join us. You can ask questions as well. My last question to you, Mike, before we go, is about the spark to leave. I want to understand, how do you know, like, what kind of spark do you need to actually leave something that you built? I've built things before. I built my theater company, did it for 4 years, and I left. I've built up, my success at a career in some organization that I decided to leave. I'm building stuff now. And when I build them intentionally, I got to tell you, honestly, I have no intent. Every single time, I had never had an intention to leave. I never had the intention to leave. My intention was to grow it and make it amazing, and be there for a long, long time. So, can you explain to me how do you understand that spark to leave?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. That's honestly where I spend most of my time these days, is on that question, because I'll tell you, you are exactly right. Like, I never planned to leave the
Right.
organization. I was there for 15 years, and it was one of my first jobs from high school. Like, where do you go from there? Like, it just felt like almost like I couldn't leave. I almost actually felt stuck at one point, where I'm like, where would I go? Like, what else would I even do in the world? So for me, it was actually, and this is something I encourage everyone who's anywhere at any job, especially if it's one that they built, but really, even if you're just in any job, like, we all have a clock, and as human beings, this is a reality of being human. So if we don't reflect on sort of what's next, then we'll just never be in control of those changes. And why I say that is, especially in the nonprofit sector, but I know in the for-profit sector too, succession is a real problem. And people wait for a crisis, unfortunately, in most cases, and they're not waiting for it, it just happens. So, what I encourage folks to do is don't wait for the crisis. And for me, I had one of those crises, and I unfortunately went through a pretty challenging mental health, sort of breakdown in my own life. And only at that point did I realize, like, something needs to change. So I really do encourage you to reflect, especially if you're not thinking about it. If you're not thinking about it, it's the perfect time.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, listen, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. Those who are just watching now, feel free to watch the recording, the replay. It'll always be here on the profiles that you're watching it on. So I wish you all the best with that. Mike, wish you all the best. Stay in touch. Get in touch with Mike if you want to learn more about him and his book and his insights and things like that. And once again, it's the Power of Connection broadcast. I'm Bobby Omer. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys another day. I'll be back on Wednesday with my own kind of broadcast with another interview. And then, Mike, again, wish you well. Stay in touch. All right.
Thanks so much, Bobby. Appreciate it. Take care,
Okay.
everyone.
Take care, everybody. Take care.